All righty, welcome to the last session. Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is all about propagation, the structure of the ionosphere, reflection and absorption, sky wave and ground wave signals, sunspot cycles, how to assess propagation, solar phenomena, and scatter propagations. 3 sections, 38 questions.
There ought to be more.
There ought to be more. Okay.
That's a mouthful. And there's so many things happening in the solar stuff. It's exciting, guys.
Yeah.
We could talk. We got time to talk about it.
Well, we've got another 26 questions in Chapter 9, the safety. So between the two, we got 64 questions tonight.
And 1 every 2 minutes. Okay.
So the ionosphere. Let me move this out of the way so I can read everything. All right. How is a directional antenna pointed when making a long path contact with another station? A, toward the rising sun. B, along the gray line. C, 180 degrees from the station's short path heading. Or D, towards the north. Charlie is correct. Which of the following is typical of the lower HF frequencies during the summer? A, poor propagation at any time of day. B, worldwide propagation during the daylight hours. C, heavy distortion on signals due to photon absorption. Or D, high levels of atmospheric noise or static. The answer is delta, high levels of atmospheric noise or static during the summer.
Our static is generally created by our thunderstorms around the world. You may never even see it in your region, but it creates electricity in the atmosphere, and the radio picks it up.
All the time.
The crashes, yeah.
Crashing.
So is that in the northern hemisphere and summer in the southern hemisphere then? So there's a distinction there?
I think they're probably talking northern hemisphere mostly because that's where most of those amateurs are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Most of the people, like 60% of the people are in the northern hemisphere.
Yep. What is a characteristic of skywave signals arriving at your location by both short path and long path propagation? A, periodic fading approximately every 10 seconds. B, signal strength increased by 3 dB. C, the signal might be canceled, causing severe attenuation. Or D, a slightly delayed echo might be heard.
Delta.
Delta is correct.
Let's go back to the last question. I did not properly answer that question. I was thought about it during this one. We had a guy that come up from Florida that worked the Keys all the time, and he said that he could predict the thunderstorms at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's a way that the earth cools itself off. Kansas is the same way. So we got a lot of the thunderstorms or lightning, or dry lightning, they call it sometimes, in the summertime. So that's what that last question was referring to. We don't see it here in Washington, but they do it in the Midwest and the South.
Very common in Colorado. Afternoon storms almost every afternoon.
Yeah, almost every, very predictable.
Yep. Okay. What is the approximate maximum distance along the Earth's surface that is normally covered in one hop using the F2 region? A, 180 miles. B, 1,200 miles. C, 2,500 miles. Or D, 12,000 miles?
Charlie.
Charlie is correct, 2,500 miles. What is the approximate maximum distance along the Earth's surface that is normally covered in one hop using the E region? A, 180 miles, B, 1,200 miles, C, 2,500 miles, or D, 12,000 miles?
Bravo.
Bravo, right?
Bravo is correct, 1,200 miles for the E region. Which ionospheric layer is the closest to the surface of the Earth? A, the D layer, B, the E layer, C, the F1 layer, or D, the F2 layer?
Alpha.
Alpha is correct. The D layer is the closest. Where on the Earth do ionospheric layers reach their maximum height? A, where the sun is overhead, B, where the sun is on the opposite side of the Earth, C, where the sun is rising, D, where the sun has just set.
Alpha.
Alpha.
Alpha is correct. Why is the F2 region mainly responsible for the longest distance radio wave propagation? A, because it is the densest ionospheric layer, B, because of the Doppler effect, C, because it has the highest ionospheric, because it is the highest ionospheric region, or D, because of the meteor trails at that level?
Charlie.
Charlie is correct, because it is the highest ionospheric region. What does the term critical angle mean as used in radio wave propagation? A, the long path azimuth of a distant station, B, the short path azimuth of a distant station, C, the lowest takeoff angle that will return a radio wave to Earth under specific ionospheric conditions, or D, the highest takeoff angle that will return a radio wave to the Earth under specific ionospheric conditions?
Delta.
Okay.
Delta is correct, the highest takeoff angle. Why is the long distance communication on the 40 meter, 60 meter, 80 meter, and the 160 meter bands more difficult during the day? A, the F layer absorbs signals at those frequencies during daylight hours. B, the F layer is unstable during daylight hours. C, the D layer absorbs signals at those frequencies during daylight hours, or D, the E layer is unstable during daylight hours?
Charlie.
Charlie is correct. The D layer absorbs the signals during daylight. Which ionospheric layer is the most absorbent of long skip signals during daylight hours on frequencies below 10 megahertz? A, F2 layer, B, the F1 layer, C, the E layer, D, the D layer?
Delta.
Delta is correct, the D layer. Oh, sun, here we go.
Ooh.
What is the significance of the sunspot number with regard to HF propagation? A, higher sunspot numbers generally indicate a greater probability of good propagation at higher frequencies. B, lower sunspot numbers generally indicate greater possibility of sporadic E propagation. C, a zero sunspot number indicates that radio propagation is not possible on any band, or D, A 0 sunspot number indicates undisturbed conditions.
Alpha.
Alpha is correct. High sunspot numbers indicate general probability of good propagation. Which of the following are least reliable for long-distance communication during periods of low solar activity? A, 80 meter and 160 meters. B, 60 meters and 40 meters. C, 30 meters and 20 meters. Or D, 15 meters, 12 meters, and 10 meters.
Delta.
Delta is correct. The 15, the 12, and the 10 meter.
We lose the top part of the HF bands first when they don't have the sunspots out there.
Okay. What is the solar flux index? A measure of the highest frequency that is useful for ionospheric propagation between 2 points on the Earth. B, a count of sunspots that is adjusted for solar emissions. C, another name for the American sunspot number. Or D, a measure of solar radiation at 10.7 centimeter wavelength.
Delta.
Delta is correct. The measure of the solar radiation at 10.7 centimeters.
And this is basically measuring the X-rays that are coming off the sun. The X-rays are created at the surface when the magnetic loops come off the surface area. And if we got a number of 70 or better, we generally have some propagation. We go below 70, our propagation shuts off, even though we may have no sunspots. If the solar flex is above 70, we do have propagation.
Cool. At what point in the solar cycle does the 20-meter band usually support worldwide propagation during daylight hours? A, at the summer solstice. B, at only the maximum point of the solar cycle. C, only at the minimum point of the solar cycle. Or D, at any point in the solar cycle.
Delta.
Delta is correct. At any point in the solar cycle, 20 meters is usually good during the day.
And the reason is because if we have low sunspots, that eats up the top end, the 10 meter, 15 meter, and like that coming down. And if we're in the daytime, the D layer is going to eat up 160, 80, and 40. And what's the middle? 20. And that's why they generally call that the DX band, because it's normally, if there is propagation, it's normally open.
What causes HF propagation conditions to vary periodically in a roughly 28-day cycle? A, long-term oscillations in the upper atmosphere. B, cyclic variation in the Earth's radiation belts. C, the sun's rotation on its axis. Or D, the position of the moon in its orbit.
Charlie.
Charlie is correct. The sun's rotation on its axis. What does the K index indicate? A, the relative position of sunspots on the surface of the sun. B, the short-term stability of Earth's magnetic field. C, the stability of the sun's magnetic field. Or D, the solar radio flux at Boulder, Colorado.
Bravo.
Bravo is correct. What does the A index indicate? A, the relative position of sunspots on the surface of the sun. B, the amount of polarization of the sun's electric field. C, the long-term stability of Earth's geomagnetic field. Or D, the solar radio flux at Boulder, Colorado.
Charlie.
Charlie.
Charlie is correct. Just because we have WWV at Boulder, Colorado now? Come on. All righty. Assessing your eyesight. 15 questions. What effect does a sudden ionospheric disturbance have on the daytime ionospheric propagation of HF radio waves? A. It enhances propagation on all HF frequencies. B. It disrupts signals on the lower frequencies more than those on the higher frequencies. Or C. It disrupts communications via satellite more than direct communications. D. None, because only the areas on the night side of the Earth are affected. The correct answer is Baker. It disrupts the signals on lower frequencies more than those on higher frequencies. Approximately how long does it take the increased ultraviolet and X-ray radiation from solar flares to affect radio propagation on Earth? A. 28 days, B. 1 to 2 hours, C. 8 minutes, or D. 20 to 40 hours?
Delta.
Charlie, 8 minutes is the correct answer.
Ultraviolet is a light, so it's moving at the speed of light. If we have magnetic particles or fast winds, that's going to be moving the 20 to 40 hour situation. It's going to come a little slower, but the light will come here in 8 minutes. Does that answer
Okay.
your question?
Yeah.
Now, for some reason, I was thinking the 20 to 40, but that, yeah, once you reread the question, ultraviolet and X-ray, that's almost, well, it's the really high side.
Yep.
What is a geomagnetic storm? A sudden drop in the solar flux index. B, a thunderstorm that affects radio propagation. C, ripples in the ionosphere. Or D, a temporary disturbance in the Earth's magnetosphere.
Delta.
Delta is correct. A temporary disturbance in the Earth's magnetosphere.
Yeah, this is when the plasma and the particles from the sun take 20 to 40 hours to reach the Earth. That's what happens. It disturbs the magnetic thing, and you get the aurora borealis at night.
That's where my 20 to 40 hours was.
That's when the particles or the plasma gets to the Earth from the sun.
Grabbed in. Okay. Which of the following effects can a geomagnetic storm have on radio propagation? A, improved high latitude HF propagation. B, degraded high latitude HF propagation. C, improved ground wave propagation. Or D, degraded ground wave propagation.
Bravo.
It is Bravo, degraded high latitude HF propagation.
It's a storm, so it's going to degrade. So at that point, you have 50% chance. It doesn't affect the ground wave or the line of sight, but it does affect the HF. Yeah.
Okay. What benefit can high geomagnetic activity have on radio communications? A, auroras can reflect VHF signals. B, higher signal strength for HF signals passing through the polar regions. C, improved HF long path propagation. Or D, reduced long delayed echoes.
Alpha.
Alpha is correct.
We've already talked about the HF ones in the last question. And then the anomaly here is on 6 meters, particularly. The guys used to race home when they seen the aurora out there and talk from Anchorage into Whitehorse, 1,100 miles to the east, bouncing off the aurora. It's a great reflector for the 6 meters. So you see a little bit on 10, maybe on 2, but primarily on 6, it gives you a predictable long distance propagation.
That'd be fun if it wasn't so cold.
Those were old guys had thick skin. It didn't matter to them.
That's right. And lots of whiskey to keep you warm.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not necessarily a voice mode. It's more of a CW mode.
Okay.
It gets a little wobbly on the voice, but CW, these guys are 35 word a minute guys. I knew that right away someone get on it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. How long does it take charged particles from coronal mass ejections to affect radio propagation on Earth? A, 28 days, B, 14 days, C, 4 to 8 minutes, D, 20 to 40 hours.
That one's Delta.
Delta.
That one is delta, that's right. That's my 20 to 40 hours. How are radio communications usually affected by the charged particles that reach Earth from solar coronal holes? A, HF communications are improved. B, HF communications are disturbed. C, VHF-UHF ducting is improved. Or D, VHF-UHF ducting is disturbed.
Bravo, right?
Bravo is correct. HF and disturbed. What factors affect MUF? A, path, distance, and location. B, time of day and season. C, solar radiation and ionospheric disturbances. Or D, all these choices are correct.
It was
Delta.
D.
D, all of these are correct. Which of the following applies when selecting an HF frequency for lowest attenuation when transmitting on HF? A, select a frequency just below the MUF. B, select a frequency just above the LUF. C, select a frequency just below the critical frequency. Or D, select a frequency just above the critical frequency.
I think it's Charlie. Oh, A.
Alpha, select a frequency just below the maximum usable frequency.
That's called a sweet zone.
What is a reliable way to determine if the MUF is high enough to support skip propagation between your station and a distant station on frequencies between 14 and 30 megahertz? A, listen for signals from an international beacon in the frequency range you plan to use. B, send a series of dots on the band and listen for echoes from your signal. C, check the strength of TV signals from Western Europe. Or D, check the strength of signals on the MF/AM broadcast band.
It's
It's Alpha.
Alpha is right. Listen for those international beacon stations. What usually happens to radio waves with frequencies below the MUF and above the LUF when they are sent into the ionosphere? A, they are bent back to the Earth. B, they pass through the ionosphere. C, they are amplified by the interaction with the ionosphere. Or D, they are bent and trapped in the ionosphere to circle the Earth.
Alpha.
Alpha is correct. They are bent back to the Earth. What usually happens to radio waves with frequencies below the LUF? A, they are bent back to Earth. B, they pass through the ionosphere. C, they are completely absorbed by the ionosphere, or D, they are bent and trapped in the ionosphere to circle the Earth?
Charlie.
Charlie is correct. They are completely absorbed. What does LUF stand for? A, the lowest usable frequency for communication between 2 points. B, the longest universal function for communications between 2 points. C, the lowest usable frequency during a 24-hour period. Or D, the longest universal function during a 24-hour period.
Alpha.
It was A, alpha.
Alpha is correct. I like that universal function,
Yeah. I need one of those.
and especially during a 24-hour period. What does MUF stand for? A, the minimum usable frequency for communication between 2 points. B, the maximum usable frequency for communication between 2 points. C, the minimum usable frequency during a 24-hour period. Or D, the maximum usable frequency during a 24-hour period.
Bravo.
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 Bravo is correct. What happens to HF propagation when the LUF exceeds the MUF? A, no HF radio frequency will support ordinary skywave communications over the path. B, HF communications over the path are enhanced. C, double hop propagation along the path is more common. Or D, propagation over the path on all HF frequencies is enhanced.
Alpha.
Alpha is correct. Scatterbodes, just 5 questions. What is a characteristic of HF scatter? A, phone signals have high intelligibility. B, signals have a fluttering sound. C, there are very large sudden swings in signal strength. Or D, scatter propagation occurs only at night.
Bravo.
Bravo is correct. Signals have a fluttering sound.
Where does the scatter happen? We talked about the E layer going out 1,200 miles and the F layer going out 2,500 miles. The scatter is between that, less than 1,200 miles, and on the E layer, and less than about 2,500 miles on the HF layer, or the F layer, the F layer.
Okay.
No.
What makes HF scatter signals often sound distorted? A, ionospheric layer involved is unstable. B, ground waves are absorbing much of the signal. Or C, the E region is not present. Or D, energy is scattered into the skip zone through several different radio wave paths.
Delta.
Delta is correct. Why are HF scatter signals in the skip zone usually weak? A, only a small part of the signal energy is scattered into the skip zone. B, signals are scattered from the magnetosphere, which is not a good reflector. C, propagation is through ground waves, which absorb most of the signal energy. D, propagation is through ducts in the F region, which absorbs most of the energy.
Alpha.
Alpha.
Alpha is correct. Only a small part of the signal energy is scattered into the skip zone. What type of propagation allows signals to be heard in the transmitting station's skip zone? A, Faraday rotation. B, scatter. Wow. What is letter C? Something hop needs to be
Somebody left-
fixed.
They left the C out there. That's Cordell Hop.
Mhm.
Okay, let me
Yeah.
get a pen and fix that one in the next slide. G3CO9 fix C. Alrighty, so the answer is
Bravo.
Bravo.
Bravo scatter. What is near vertical incident skywave NVIS propagation? A. Propagation near the MUF. B. Short distance MU or medium frequency or HF propagation using high elevation angles. C. Long path HF propagation at sunrise and sunset. D. Double hop propagation near the LUF.
Bravo.
Bravo.
Bravo is correct. Short distance, medium frequency, or high frequency propagation at high angles.
What you do is put your antenna about 1/10 of a wavelength above the ground. The ground acts like the reflector, and it's like a 2-element beam shooting the energy straight up, and it comes down in a 300-mile cone on it. So that's what NVIS is. Your element spacing on your Yagis are about 1/10 of a wavelength apart. So if you got the dipole a 10th wave off the ground then becomes a reflector. And it's not directional, it's omni.
Cool.
Does that help you understand the things?
Yeah, that's what we use in in the Mars. A lot of
Yep.
near NVIS.
Yeah, it's pretty reliable on that. We use it on a Diderot, and we'd get out about 500 miles and it starts fading on us. And then we transfer the headquarters out to Nome and get the other 500 miles on it. So, yeah.
Cool. So that was chapter 8. Now we're going on to chapter 9.
Let me interrupt you, Jim, on this one.
Sure.
The space weather lady, Tamitha Snow, does a weekly podcast, but she hasn't been quite making it that thing. She's got some other issues going on in her life. She's got Millerville University. She's doing master level classes at, but she does this weekly podcast about the sun and the sunspots and all that sort of stuff. Stereo View A, which looks at the sun at this point from the side, not from the back. And it's about 7 to 10 minutes on long. Go ahead and look it up, the Space Weather Lady, and get into her podcast. You'll learn an awful lot. Just listen to the podcast. And a lot of times she just talks over my head. So when I say some of these things, the space weather propagation and that sort of stuff that we're talking about today, there's a couple things that some of these questions are wrong because what we understand now versus 20, 30 years or 40 years ago. And I think in the next 10 years, we'll probably have another set of questions. And because our understanding of the sun is much more, it's much more in depth at this point. We got a probe going into the sun, getting closer and closer and closer, seeing things we've never seen before on it. But it's really a fast developing science at this point, and she's on the cutting edge of it.
Yep.
It's a free podcast, so go ahead and pick it up. She talks to GPSers, she talks to amateur radio operators, and like that. We're one of her key audiences, and she does have her amateur license.
Yeah. And she's on Ham Nation. She's also got a YouTube channel. And
Yep.
I like Daniel, like watching her, and she does put an awful lot of stuff in words and terms that you can understand. But yeah, there are times where where you listen to a podcast or one of her in-depth classes, and it just kind of, wow, it takes some time to soak it up. But she is definitely a cool.
She's doing a once a month podcast that lasts a couple hours, 2, maybe 3 hours on a thing on different subjects like mass coronal ejections, solar flares, she's taking these things, these ideas, and going in depth on the thing. That's why I'm talking to you about the flex, the solar flex number, and that's why I know so much about it, because of these podcasts that been going on. She's been doing it a year or so. And it's just amazing the stuff she comes. And I grant you, she's going to talk over your head, but something's going to sink in. You'll get something out of it, and it will help us learn when to get on the radio and propagate.
Yep. I'd like to get her as one of the speakers at Mike and Key, but I haven't reached out to her yet.
Well, I'm one of her patrons. I could probably do something about that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I think she'd be a great person, not only because of her knowledge, but because it bring another XYL into the team to maybe spur on other XYLs or
Yeah.
YLs.
Well, her mini courses are on the first Saturday of the month typically, and unless she's not traveling the third Saturday, she'll probably be available. She does the mini courses 10 a.m. our time anyway to noon. So
Oh,
yeah, it may
Cool.
fit well with her schedule.
yeah. Okay, last chapter. 3 sections, 26 questions, but I bet Daniel has lots of good things in here. Soldering safety, wiring practices, generator safety, and our good old lightning. Which of the following is a danger from lead tin solder? A. Lead can contaminate food if hands are not washed carefully after handling the solder. B. High voltages can cause lead tin solder to disintegrate suddenly. C. Tin in the solder can cold flow, causing shorts in the circuit. D. The RF energy can convert the lead into poisonous gas.
Alpha.
Alpha.
Don't
Always lick,
overthink that question.
yeah, always
Yeah.
lick your hands after soldering. Oh, wash your hands.
Yeah, watch it.
Which wire or wires in a 4-conductor connection should be attached to fuses or circuit breakers in a device operated from a 240-volt single-phase source? A. Only the 2 wires carrying voltage. B. Only the neutral wire. C. Only the ground wire. Or D. All wires.
Alpha.
Alpha is correct. Only the
You're looking at the red and the black ones.
Yeah.
You never fuse the ground.
Counterproductive.
Don't.
Don't do that.
According to the National Electrical Code, what is the max or minimum wire size that may be used safely for wiring with a 12 or 20 amp hour 20 amp circuit breaker? A. AWG number 20. B. AWG number 16. C. AWG number 12. Or D. AWG number 8.
Charlie.
It's Charlie.
Charlie is correct. AWG number 12 for a 20 amp.
The American wire gauge is how many times they've pulled it through. They pulled it through 20 times. It's pretty thin. You're talking
Ah.
phone wire. 16 is speaker gauge wire.
Huh.
And what I normally do is 14 gauge is 15 amps, and then 12 is 20, and 10, which is the larger wire, is going to be 30. So I generally focus off 14 gauge, which is 15 amps.
Cool.
I didn't know the number of times it was pulled through. That's pretty cool to know.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah,
I
that's-
wondered about that.
That's why I kind of threw out that little trivia out there. Sometimes these
Yeah.
little trivias help you to remember the answer.
Click in the brain. Which of the following conditions will cause a ground fault circuit interrupter, GFCI, to disconnect the 120 or 240 volt AC line power to a device? A. Current flowing from one or more of the voltage carrying wires to the neutral wire. B. Current flowing from one or more of the voltage carrying wires directly to ground. C. Overvoltage on the voltage carrying wires. Or D. All these choices are correct.
Bravo.
Bravo is correct. Current flowing from one or more of the voltage carrying wires directly to ground.
And it only takes a couple milliamps to trip a functioning GFIC.
Which
Doesn't take
of,
much current.
which of the following is covered by the National Electrical Code? A. Acceptable bandwidth limits. B. Acceptable modulation limits. C. Electrical safety inside the ham shack. Or D. RF exposure limits of the human body.
Charlie.
Charlie.
Charlie is correct. The only thing that's got electrical in it. Come on.
And there's actually a whole chapter dedicated to ham radio shacks.
In the electrical code book?
NEC, yes.
Ah, nice. I know those are spendy books when you go to get them.
I think they're about $130 or so.
Yeah.
We've got a bunch of electricians that are amateurs, and if you got questions, we'll get an answer from an expert
Yeah.
in here. My brother is got his 07. I got another guy with his 07 in Federal Way. Jim Monson. A couple of people have their 01, which is a commercial. So we got a bunch of electricians in the amateur world here.
Yep. Very handy on field day.
And they would rather you ask than to go ahead and do something stupid.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of a power supply interlock? A. To prevent unauthorized changes to the circuit that would void the manufacturer's warranty. B. To shut down the unit if it becomes too hot. C. To ensure that dangerous voltages are removed if the cabinet is opened. Or D. To shut off the power supply if too much voltage is produced.
Charlie.
Charlie.
Charlie is correct. To ensure
Now-
dangerous.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
And just because 110 or the 200 or 240 voltage is removed from the circuit, the capacitors, the filter capacitors for the power supply have not drained down yet.
Yep.
So even if you have opened it up, don't jam your hand right in there too quick.
Yep. And even bleeder resistors take a while to drain stuff down.
Yep.
Which of the following is a primary reason for not placing a gasoline-fueled generator inside an occupied area? A. Danger of carbon monoxide poisoning. B. Danger of engine overtorque. C. Lack of oxygen for adequate combustion. D. Lack of nitrogen for adequate combustion.
Alpha.
Yep, good old alpha. Danger of carbon monoxide poisoning. Which of the following is true of an emergency generator installation? A. The generator should be located in a well-ventilated area. B. The generator must be insulated from ground. C. The fuel should be stored near the generator for rapid refueling in case of an emergency. D. All these choices are correct.
Alpha.
Alpha.
Alpha is correct. The generator should always be in a well-ventilated area. What must you do when powering your house from an emergency generator? A. Disconnect the incoming utility power feed. B. Ensure that the generator is not grounded. C. Ensure that all lightning grounds are disconnected. D. All these choices are correct.
Alpha.
Alpha.
Alpha, prevent backfeeding by disconnecting the incoming utility power feed. Why should soldered joints not be used with wires that connect the base of a tower to a system of ground rods? A, the resistance of solder is too high. B, the solder flux will prevent a low conductivity connection. C, solder has too high a dielectric constant to provide adequate lightning protection. D, a solder joint will likely be destroyed by the heat of a lightning strike.
Delta.
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 Solder melts about 200 degrees and it just disappears. When they talk about bonding, they're talking about bolting or welding, not soldering.
Okay. Which of the following is good practice for lightning protection grounds? A, they must be bonded to all buried water and gas lines. B, bends in ground wires must be made as close as possible to a right angle. C, lightning grounds must be connected to all ungrounded wiring. D, they must be bonded together with all other grounds.
Delta.
Delta is correct. They must be bonded together with all other grounds. RF exposure, 11 questions. What is one way that RF energy can affect human body tissue? A, it heats body tissue. B, it causes radiation poisoning. C, it causes the blood count to reach a dangerously low level. C, it cools body tissue.
Alpha.
Alpha.
Alpha is correct. It heats the body tissue. Which of the following properties is important in estimating whether an RF signal exceeds the maximum permissible exposure, MPE? A, its duty cycle. B, its frequency. C, its power density. Or D, all these choices are correct.
Delta.
Delta.
Delta, all these choices are correct. How can you determine that your station complies with FCC RF exposure regulations? A, by calculation based on FCC OET Bulletin 65. B, by calculation based on computer modeling. C, by measurement of field strength using calibrated equipment. Or D, all these choices are correct.
Charlie.
The correct answer is Delta.
Ooh.
All these choices are correct. You can have a field strength meter, but it needs to be calibrated, and then the computer modeling, and then Bulletin 65.
Bulletin 65 applies to everybody, commercial as well. So we all have to abide by Bulletin 65.
What does time averaging mean in reference to RF radiation exposure? A, the average amount of power developed by the transmitter over a specific 24-hour period. B, the average time it takes RF radiation to have any long-term effect on the body. C, the total time of the exposure. Or D, the total RF exposure averaged over a certain time.
Delta.
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 Delta is correct. The only answer with averaging in it.
And they look at a 6-minute period of time, not 24 hours.
Okay. What must you do if an evaluation of your station shows RF energy radiated from your station exceeds permissible limits? A, Take action to prevent human exposure to the excessive RF fields. B. File an environmental impact statement, EIS 97, with the FCC. Or C. Secure written permission from your neighbors to operate above the controlled MPE limits. Or D. All these choices are correct.
Alpha.
Alpha.
Alpha is correct. Take action to prevent human exposure to the excessive RF fields. What precaution must be taken when installing a ground-mounted antenna? A. It should not be installed higher than you can reach. B. It should not be installed in a wet area. Well, that leaves out Seattle.
Yeah.
C. It should be limited to 10 feet in height. Or D. It should be installed such that it is protected against unauthorized access.
Delta.
Delta.
Delta sounds the best in all of those. What effect does transmitter duty cycle have when evaluating RF exposure? A lower transmitter duty cycle permits greater short-term exposure levels. B, a higher transmitter duty cycle permits greater short-term exposure levels. Or C, high duty cycle transmitters are exempt from RF exposure evaluation requirements. Or D, high duty cycle transmitters are exempt from RF exposure requirements.
Alpha.
Alpha is correct. A lower transmitter duty cycle permits greater short-term exposure levels. Which of the following steps must an amateur operator take to ensure compliance with RF safety regulations when transmitter power exceeds levels specified in FCC Part 97.13? A. Post a copy of FCC Part 97.13 in the station. B. Post a copy of OET Bulletin 65 in the station. C. Perform a routine RF exposure evaluation. Or D. Contact the FCC for a visit to conduct a station evaluation.
That would be Charlie.
Correct answer is Charlie. Perform a routine RF exposure evaluation. What type of instrument can be used to accurately measure an RF field? A. A receiver with an S meter. B. A calibrated field strength meter with a calibrated antenna. Or C. An SWR meter with a peak reading function. Or D. An oscilloscope with a high stability crystal marker generator.
Bravo.
Bravo.
Bravo is correct. A calibrated field strength meter with a calibrated antenna. What is one thing that can be done if evaluation shows that a neighbor might receive more than the allowable limit of RF exposure from the main lobe of a directional antenna? A. Change to a non-polarized antenna with higher gain. B. Post a warning sign that is clearly visible to the neighbor. C. Use an antenna with a higher front-to-back ratio. Or D. Take precautions to ensure that the antenna cannot be pointed in their direction.
Delta.
Delta.
Delta is correct. What precaution should you take if you install an indoor transmitting antenna? A. Locate the antenna close to your operating position to minimize feedline radiation. B. Position the antenna along the edge of the wall to reduce parasitic radiation. C, make sure that MPE limits are not exceeded in occupied areas. Or D, make sure the antenna is properly shielded.
Charlie.
Charlie?
Charlie is correct. Make sure your MPE limits are not exceeded in your occupied areas. And it's always good to shield your antenna. That way you don't get anything. Outdoor safety. Wow. Are you kidding me? 3 questions for outdoor safety. Which of these choices should be observed when climbing a tower using a safety belt or harness? A, never lean back or rely on the belt alone to support your weight. B, confirm that the belt is rated for the weight of the climber and that it is within its allowable service life. C, ensure that all heavy tools are securely fastened to the belt D-ring. D, all these choices are correct.
Bravo?
One's Bravo.
Delta.
Oh,
Bravo!
Bravo.
Ah, you got me.
Yeah, it's.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just read that
Bravo.
this afternoon.
That one threw me because I really thought that, securely fastening heavy tools
Yeah.
or
Yep.
And A is also common sense.
yeah.
Yeah. All righty. B is correct. Jim fails. That's why I don't climb towers.
Fun.
I wish I had a tower to climb. What should be done by any person preparing to climb a tower that supports electrically powered devices? A, notify the electric company that a person will be working on the tower. B, make sure all circuits that supply power to the tower are locked out and tagged. C, unground the base of the tower. D, all these choices are correct.
Bravo.
Bravo. Make sure that all circuits or the power supply to the tower are locked out and tagged. What precaution should you take whenever you adjust or repair an antenna? A, ensure that you and the antenna structure are grounded. B, turn off the transmitter and disconnect the feed line. C, wear a radiation badge. Or D, all these choices are correct.
Must be
Bravo.
B. Bravo.
Bravo is correct. Turn off the transmitter and disconnect the feed line. And then wear a radiation badge.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Dip, dip, dip. That's all, folks.
Ooh.
Mm.
So, let's move this stuff out of the way. And any questions, any thoughts before I'd like to do a couple of little practice tests. Where did I put it? Here we go. We'll do the ham study one first. Okay, this is a group effort. We got to see how well we do in an actual ham study test. Are you ready? Question 1. What makes HF scatter signal often sound distorted? A, ground waves are absorbing much of the signal. The E region is not present. Energy is scattered into the skip zone through several different radio wave paths, or the ionospheric layer is involved, is unstable.
That's Charlie. We just did that.
Okay. Which of the following is most commonly used for SSB voice communications in the VHF and UHF bands: vestigial sideband, double sideband, lower sideband, or upper sideband.
Delta, I think.
I'm thinking it's delta also.
Delta sounds good to me too. What does MUF stand for? The maximum usable frequency for communication between 2 points. The minimum usable frequency for communication between 2 points. The minimum usable frequency during a 24-hour period, or the maximum usable frequency during a 24-hour period.
That one's alpha.
Alpha.
Alpha sounds good to me. What circuit is used to process signals from the RF amplifier and local oscillator to send the result to the IF filter in a superheterodyne receiver? Mixer, detector, balanced modulator, or IF amplifier?
Really?
Thinking alpha. But
Alpha sounds good to me too.
mhm.
How are the two separate frequencies of a frequency shift keyed FSK signal identified? On and off, high and low, dot and dash, or mark and space?
Mark in
And
space.
delta.
Delta sounds good to me. How does antenna height affect the horizontal azimuthal radiation pattern of a horizontal dipole HF antenna? If the antenna is less than half the wavelength high, the azimuthal pattern is almost omnidirectional. Antenna height has no effect on the pattern. If the antenna is too high, the pattern becomes unpredictable. If the antenna is less than half a wavelength high, radiation off the end of the wire is eliminated.
Must be alpha.
Alpha.
Alpha sounds good to me. What is required to obtain a new general license after a previously held license has expired and the 2-year grace period has passed? There is no requirements other than being able to show a copy of the expired license. They must have a letter from the FCC showing they once held an amateur or commercial license. C, the applicant must pass a current Element 2 exam. Or D, applicant must be able to produce a copy of the page from a call book published in the U.S. showing his or her name and address.
You see.
Charlie. Which of the following is a characteristic of QPSK31? Its bandwidth is approximately the same as BPSK31. Its encoding provides error correction. It's sideband sensitive, or all these choices are correct.
Delta.
I think delta too, because I know that one's the one, the QPSK provides the error correction. And I remember it's about the size same, so it's got to be that last one. What is normally meant by operating a transceiver in split mode? The transceiver is operating from an external power source. The transmitter is emitting an SSB signal as opposed to DSB operation. The transmitter is set to different transmit and receive frequencies, or the radio is operating at half power.
That one's Charlie.
Charlie is good. What standing wave ratio will result when connecting a 50 ohm feed line to a non-reactive load of 50 ohms impedance. A 50-50, 1-to-1, 2-to-1, or 0-to-0.
1-to-1.
Bravo. 1-to-1.
1-to-1 sounds good. Which of the following may cause receive interference in a radio installed in a vehicle? Ooh, all these choices are correct. The fuel delivery system, the vehicle control computer, or the battery charging system.
Alpha.
Alpha.
I think it's that battery charging, but I'll go with your alpha. Which of the following can be determined with a field strength meter? The presence and amount of phase distortion in a transmitter, the radiation pattern of an antenna, the presence and amount of amplitude distortion of a transmitter, or the radiation resistance of an antenna.
Bravo.
This one's Bravo.
That one's Bravo, yep. When selecting an SSB transmitting frequency, what minimum separation should be used to minimize interference to stations on adjacent frequencies? Approximately 6 kilohertz, 150 to 500 hertz, 5 to 50, or approximately 3 kilohertz.
Delta.
Delta.
I like delta too.
If you're less than 3 kilohertz, you're going to get a whistle.
Yeah,
That's what you-
somebody's other stuff coming in. Yep.
Ooh, and that's about 1,000 cycles. You're 1,000 cycles away from somebody else. It will create a whistle. The two signals heterodyning together.
How does a capacitor react to AC? As the frequency of the applied AC increases, the reactance increases. As the amplitude of the applied AC increases, the reactance increases. As the frequency of the applied AC increases, the reaction decreases. As the amplitude of the applied AC increases, the reactance decreases.
One is Charlie.
What is the approximate junction threshold voltage of a germanium diode? 0.7, 0.3, 1.0 volts, or 0.1?
Is Bravo 0.3,
Yep, 0.3. And the silicon?
0.7.
Is
0.7. Yep. What is an advantage of a half-wave rectifier in a power supply? The ripple frequency is twice that of a full-wave rectifier. The output voltage is 2 times the peak output voltage of the transformer. Only one diode is required. More current can be drawn from the half-wave rectifier.
Wait.
What was that?
Charlie.
Charlie, only one diode is required. What is the significance of the sunspot number with regards to HF propagation? 0 sunspot number indicates undisturbed conditions. Higher sunspot numbers generally indicate greater probability of good propagation at higher frequencies. A 0 sunspot number indicates that the radio propagation is not possible on any band. Lower sunspot numbers generally indicate greater probability of the sporadic E propagation.
Bravo.
Bravo.
we just covered this, guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
We just did that. Yeah.
How does a signal that reads 20 dB over S9 compare to one that reads S9 on a receiver, assuming properly calibrated S meter? It is 20 times less powerful. It is 100 times more powerful. it is 10 times less powerful, or it is 20 times more powerful.
Bravo.
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 Bravo, sounds good to me. Why must the metal enclosure of every item of station equipment be grounded? It prevents a blown fuse in the event of an internal short circuit. It ensures that hazardous voltages cannot appear on the chassis. It prevents signal overload. It ensures that the neutral wire is grounded.
Bravo.
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 Sounds good to me. How is the directional antenna pointed when making a long path contact with another station? Along the gray line, towards the rising sun, towards the north, or 100 degrees from the station's short path heading?
180 degrees. D.
We just did that. Yep. For which of the following modes is a Class C power stage appropriate for amplifying a modulated signal? SSB, AM, FM, or all these choices are correct? Class C.
That's the better quality one, right?
Nope,
Yeah,
Oh,
no.
really? That's the
Class
crappy
C is
one.
the one that you
C
need
for
to
crappy.
nudge all the way around.
A is the best class
Ah,
and C and D are the worst.
okay. So,
It clips the top, so FM.
yeah,
It's good for FM. It's not good for
FM.
voice,
Not
AM
good.
or sideband.
yep,
Okay. That one got me.
yeah.
What is the maximum symbol rate permitted for RTTY or data emissions transmissions on the 2-meter band? 56 kilobaud, 1200 baud, 300 baud, or 19.6 kilobaud?
I think it's 1200, but
2 meters is the higher one, so
19.6.
yeah.
Yeah.
I knew it was a
300
kilobaud, but
Yep.
300 is HF, 1200 is 10 meters, and then 2 meters is going to be 19.6, and above that you get 56 kilowatt.
okay.
Yeah.
What determines the performance of a ferrite core at different frequencies? Its conductivity, the composition or mix of materials used, its thickness, or the ratio of the outer diameter to the inner diameter?
bravo.
Bravo.
Bravo, sounds good. What is the combined vertical and horizontal polarization pattern of a multi-wavelength horizontal loop antenna? A figure 8 similar to a dipole, 4 major loops with deep nulls, radiation maximum is straight up, or virtually omnidirectional with a lower peak vertical radiation angle than a dipole?
I think it's delta.
I'm leaning towards that one too. What does it mean when a CW operator sends KN at the end of a transmission? Operating full break-in, listening for novice stations, listening only for a specific station or stations, or closing now? KN,
Delta.
Let me see,
Oh, C.
listening
See.
for.
a specific station.
Station
CL
code.
is clearing.
Which of the following would disqualify a third party from participating in stating a message over an amateur station? The third party is not a U.S. citizen. The third party is speaking in a language other than English. The third party amateur license has been revoked or not reinstated, or the third party is a licensed amateur.
Charlie.
That was
Yes.
Charlie.
I think Charlie too. What precaution should you take if you install an indoor antenna? We just had this one.
Just did this one. So it's Charlie.
What must you do when powering your house from an emergency generator?
Delta.
Yep, don't backfeed the utility guys.
Or fry the guy in the wires outside.
They will not be happy.
What is the power limit for beacon stations? 20 watts PEP, 100 watts PEP, 10 watts PEP, or 200 watts PEP?
Bravo.
Bravo.
What segment of the 80-meter band is most commonly used for digital transmissions? 3775 to 3825, 3500 to 3525, 3570 to 3600, 3700 to 3750.
I think it's Delta.
It feels like,
Alpha.
Let's
Alpha.
see.
yeah,
Let's see. B is the for the extras. It's the quiet zone for the extras.
okay. For some reason, 3770. Oh, yeah, you're right. 3570. It's our 70 trick.
It's the bottom of the band, and it's the first 70 in the bottom of the band. On 20 meters is going to be 14,070.
Yeah.
On 15 is going to be 21,070.
Yeah, Daniel's 770 trick. I just
Yeah,
remembered it.
It's the first 70 in the bottom, coming up from the bottom of the band.
What causes a volt to appear across the secondary winding of a transformer when an AC voltage source is connected across its primary winding? Mutual capacitance, mutual inductance, displacement current coupling, or capacitive coupling?
Bravo.
Bravo.
Bravo is
It
correct.
can't be A or D because those are both related to capacitors, and we have an inductor.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
What value of an AC signal produces the same power dissipation in a resistor as a DC voltage of the same value? The peak value, the RMS value, the peak-to-peak value, or the reciprocal of the RMS value?
It was RMS was B.
What is the relationship between transmitted symbol rate and bandwidth? Lower symbol rates require wider bandwidth. Symbol rate and bandwidth are not related. Bandwidth is always half the symbol rate. Higher symbol rates require wider bandwidth.
That was
Oh.
Delta.
Delta, higher and wider.
that is not necessarily true at some of the newer modes in here,
Hmm.
but the FCC has not
Updated.
changed on that.
Yeah.
They had 701 comments on it 5 years ago when we asked about changing that. But generally that is true. The higher bandwidth, the higher rate you're going at, the more bandwidth you need.
What is meant by the main lobe of a directive antenna? The direction of maximum radiated field strength from the antenna, the point of maximum current in a radiated antenna element, the maximum voltage standing wave point on a radiating element, or the magnitude of a maximum vertical angle of radiation.
That was Alpha.
Alpha sounds good to me.
These guys did a good job dreaming up answers. I say that.
Which of the following frequencies is within the general class of the 75-meter band? 1875 kilohertz, 3900 kilohertz, 3750 kilohertz, or 4005 kilohertz? General class 75.
Going to be B.
Bravo. Let's just
A
do
is
the
100. A is 160 meters, and D is outside the band. C is just in that no man's land, where your extras are in there, but your advanced and your generals are not. So
Are we ready? Did
Roll,
we-
Please.
Did
Go for
we
it.
pass? Dun, 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 dun. Holy
Wow.
smokes.
Holy
Got 'em
cow.
all.
Holy moly.
You knocked
I
it out
helped
of
on a couple of them.
Sweet.
And we can
Hey,
take the exam together, right?
Yeah, let's all do this.
Yeah, but the problem is we divide the score. But if you have 3 people, you divide the score. You're guaranteed to fail.
okay, yeah, so there's 10 participants minus me for doubling, so yeah. Good deal.
3's not a passing score.
3's not a passing score. Okay. How about ARRL? One more. Just to be different. Take a practice exam.
I
Okay,
think on
you-
QRZ, you get 20 exams. You go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and ARRL, and as well as ham study, they give you another test, a completely different test every time you start a test.
yeah, and that's the way all of these are, is they randomize them. Oh, by the way, before we go off of this, so when you're on here, you can click the corner for an explanation, and if you have any of them wrong, it'll give you a red and a green, but we got them all right. And here's an explanation from somebody that
Huh.
put in there, and you can actually go in and edit if you think it's different. So that's one of the things that's on the ham study.
Mhm.
And it's a different layout. Notice how it gives you kind of like the cue cards, whereas this is more like a test. Okie dokie. What is meant by the term MMIC? Monolithic microwave integrated circuit, mode modulated integrated circuit, military manufactured integrated circuit, multi-megabyte integrated circuit.
That was alpha.
Delta.
Alpha.
Oh.
Monolithic microwave integrated circuit. What is the maximum transmitting power of an amateur station? Let me start that over. What is the maximum transmitting power an amateur station may use on the 12-meter band? An effective radiated power equivalent to 100 watts from a half-wave dipole, 50 watts PEP, 1,500 watts PEP, or 200 PEP on the 12-meter.
Carolyn?
Charlie.
Which of the following most limits the HF mobile installation? FCC rules limiting mobile output power on the 75-meter band, picket fencing, efficiency of the electrically short antenna, or the wire gauge of the DC power line to the transceiver.
Charlie.
Charlie.
Yep, too short of antennas. Which of the following causes opposition to the flow of alternating current in an inductor? Admittance, conductance, reluctance, or reactance?
Reactance, delta.
Reactance.
Yeah, reactance. How are radio communications usually affected by the charged particles that reach the Earth from solar coronal holes? VHF UHF ducting is improved. HF communication is improved. HF communications are disrupted, or VHF UHF ducting is disturbed.
Charlie.
Charlie. What portion of the AC cycle is converted to DC by a half-wave rectifier? 360 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or 270 degrees?
That would be Charlie, 180.
Charlie sounds good. Which of the following describes a waterfall display? Oh, I love this question.
I know. Eye test.
It's an eye test. Frequency is vertical, signal strength is intensity, and time is horizontal. Let's just go with that.
Yeah,
Is that-
time isn't time vertical.
No.
Oh no, time is vertical. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, frequency is
Frequency
horizontal.
is
Frequency
That's
is
the first thing.
horizontal,
Right, time
strength
vertical.
is intensity, and
Yeah,
time
it's
is
delta.
vertical. That one. Because I would confuse myself by reading every single one of those.
Yeah,
The
yeah, you
fin-
would. So just look at frequency and it's horizontal and then go
Right.
after those two.
Yeah, frequency and time. Get those two. Which of the following is true concerning access to frequencies? Nets have priority. Contest operations must always yield to non-contest use of frequencies. Except during emergencies, no amateur station has priority to any frequency. Let's just go with that.
Yeah, that's the one.
What does the feed point impedance of a half-wave dipole change as the feed point is moved from the center to the ends? It steadily decreases. It is unaffected by the location of the feed point. It steadily increases, or it peaks at about 1/8 wavelength from the end.
This is gonna be Charlie. Well,
To move
I think
from
it's Charlie, but I could be
I
up on
mean,
it.
it's going to be alpha. Because your
Oh,
half-wave dipole is 72 ohms, a vertical is 35 ohms, and it's going that way. Go ahead and put C down there. You'll be wrong, and we'll see what happens, what they do with it.
oh,
That's
How
9.
close to the upper edge of the phone segment should your displayed carrier frequency be when using a 3 kilohertz wide USB? At least 3 kilohertz below the edge of the band, at least 3 kilohertz above the edge of the band, at least 1 kilohertz below the edge of the segment, or at least 1 kilohertz above the edge of the segment.
Bravo.
Think about that.
You're using upper sideband.
So your dial
And-
frequency is going to be below it. at
Oh, the
bottom edge
below,
of it.
right. Alpha.
Alpha.
Yeah.
What is the primary purpose of the screen grid in a vacuum tube? A, to increase the control grid resistance, to increase the efficiency, or to reduce grid to plate capacitance, or to decrease plate resistance. Back to tubes.
yeah.
I think it was this one, if I remember
Yeah,
right.
That one sounds
Right.
right.
And that's 1979, coming back to haunt me. What type of device is often used to match transmitter output impedance to an impedance not equal to 50 ohms? An antenna coupler or antenna tuner, a Q multiplier, a balance modulator, or an SWR bridge?
To be alpha.
That is alpha. What license examinations may you administer when you are an accredited VE holding a general class operator license? General and technician, technician only, general only, amateur extra, general, and technician.
Bravo.
Bravo.
Bravo. Only lower than you. What is a reason why many amateurs keep a station log? The ITU requires a log of all international contacts to help with a reply if an FCC requests information. The ITU requires a log of all international third-party traffic. The log provides evidence of operation needed to renew a license without a retest.
Bravo.
Bravo.
Bravo, to help the FCC if they request. What is the reason for neutralizing the final amplifier stage of a transmitter? To eliminate self-oscillations, to limit the modulation index, to keep the carrier on frequency, or to cut off the final amplifier during standby period. Neutralizing is for eliminating oscillations. Alpha.
Hmm.
What process combines two signals in a non-linear circuit or connection to produce unwanted spurious outputs? Detection, roll-off, intermodulation, or heterodyning?
That one's heterodyning delta.
Is it delta?
Pretty sure it's
Means two
heterodyning.
nonlinear connection to reserve.
Or maybe it's intermodulation. I think it's heterodyning though.
I think it
I
might
would
be
guess
Charlie.
heterodyning, but you know, I could be wrong.
Final answer?
Oh, to produce unwanted. Oh, hang on a second.
To produce unwanted.
Unwanted. That must be
I
Charlie.
think
Then.
it's Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie.
Hmm.
Which of the following is a way to establish contact with a digital messaging system gateway station? A. Send an email to the system control operator. Send or respond when the okay. Getting tired. Respond when the station broadcasts its SSID. Transmit a connect message to the station's public frequency, or send a QRL in Morse code.
Oh, that one's Charlie.
That one is Charlie. Good old WinLink. What does LUF stand for? Lowest usable frequency in 24. Longest universal function. We know it's not universal functions.
Right.
So is it for 24 hours?
2 points. It's Charlie.
2 points. Charlie. I like that. Longest universal function.
Yeah, I need to get myself a universal function.
Which of the following can be adjusted to optimize forward gain, front to back ratio, or SWR bandwidth of a Yagi antenna? The spacing of each element along the boom, the number of elements on the boom, all these choices are correct, or the physical length of the boom.
That one's Charlie.
I think it's Charlie.
I agree. I think that is Charlie. Whoops. What is the purpose of a power supply interlock?
Just did that one.
We just did that one. To ensure
Okay,
dangerous
so-
voltages are removed and not void the manufacturer's warranty.
We just did this one too.
Yes.
What does the KN stand for?
Well, it's
Alpha.
Alpha.
Alpha. Ooh. Who or what determines good engineering and good amateur practice as applied to the operation of an amateur station in all respects not covered by Part 97 rules? The control operator, the FCC, the IEEE, or the ITU?
It's the
That's
FCC.
alpha. Oh, FCC.
Final answer?
Bravo.
Mhm.
Which of the following is used to process signals from the baseband modulator, then send them to the mixer in some single sideband phone transmitters? Carrier oscillator, a filter, IF amplifier, or F amplifier?
Hmm.
Process signals from the balance modulators and sends them to the mixer.
I'm guessing Charlie.
Process signals from the balance modulator and sends them to Charlie. Sounds good to me. Which of the following steps must an amateur operator take to ensure compliance with RF safety regulations when transmitter power exceeds levels specified in FCC Part 9713?
And
Just
we
do
had
that
this
one too.
too. Alpha.
Alpha.
Why should an amateur operator normally avoid transmitting on 14.100, 18.110, 21.150, 24.930, and 28.200? A system of propagation beacon stations operates on those frequencies.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the
it.
one. What makes HF scatter signals often sound distorted?
Just take
Ground
that.
wave?
Yeah. That one's Charlie.
Charlie. What is the recommended way to break in a phone contact? Say breaker breaker. Say CQ CQ, then call the station. Say your call sign once. Or say QRZ several times, followed by your call sign.
Charlie.
Charlie.
Breaker breaker 19. Oh, come on. Which of the following can be determined with a directional wattmeter? Standing wave ratio, RF interference, radio wave propagation, or antenna front to back ratio?
I want to say delta.
I think it's alpha.
Oh, it's
Alpha is the right way. Front,
Wow.
forward versus reflected.
Okay.
You'll see a FWD and REF on your SWR meter. Okay, here's the fun one. Which of the following is characteristic of QPSK31?
Those are
It's
the
in-
other test.
Its encoding provides error correction. Its bandwidth is approximately the same as BPSK 31. All of these are correct, or it is sideband sensitive. Charlie.
Yeah.
What is the value in microfarads of a 4,700 nanofarad NF capacitor? 0.47, 47,000, 47, or 4.7?
4.7.
4.7.
Delta.
Delta. What must be done to prevent standing waves on an antenna feed line? The feed line must be cut to a length equal to the odd number of electrical quarter wavelength. The antenna feed point impedance must be matched to the characteristic impedance of the feed line. The feed line must be cut to length equal to the even number of a physical half wavelengths, or the antenna feed point must be at DC ground potential.
That was Bravo.
Which of the following might be useful for reducing RF interference to audio frequency devices? Reverse bias diode, a bypass capacitor, a bypass inductor, or a forward bias diode.
Bravo.
Bypass capacitor sounds good. What is the primary purpose of antenna traps? To prevent multiband operation, to prevent out-of-band operation, to provide balanced feed point impedance, or to notch spurious frequencies.
Alpha.
Isn't that one?
Alpha.
Alpha, yeah, multiband uses multi-traps. Which of the following amateur bands is restricted to communications only on specific channels rather than frequency ranges? 60 meters, 30 meters, 12 meters, or 11 meters?
I think it's 60 meters.
That
isn't
was
it?
60 also.
That is 60, correct. What is the output PEP of an unmodulated carrier if an average if an average reading wattmeter connected to the transmitter output indicates 1060, 1500 watts, 2120 watts, 1060 watts, or 530 watts?
Isn't it Bravo?
2120.
Really? Where are you gonna get the extra wattage?
Uh-oh.
I think it's
EP is-
10.
So would be half that.
Oh, Charlie.
It's unmodulated. It's the same.
Unmodulated, it's the same.
Oh. Duh.
All righty.
Late.
I consider that a trick question, by the way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I warned you about.
Holy cow.
Unmodulated, it's the same power.
Yeah.
You haven't created any power.
Yep.
Okay. Are we ready? 3, 2,
Kablooey.
97%.
Not bad.
Incorrect. Now you see on this one, it gives you your little
Checkbox.
checkbox on each one of them that is correct. So-
Nine.
We missed one, I guess.
Yeah, what did we miss?
Yeah, where did our training fail?
Yeah, really.
I
Uh-oh.
want my money back.
At 10 o'clock at night.
I want my money back. Which
Here-
of the following is used to Oh, this was the one that we
Yeah.
were.
We were
Yeah.
A
debating.
balanced modulator is going to create your upper and lower side bands.
Ah, right.
And so what you want to do, you want to use a filter to filter
Right.
out one of the side bands. When I say a balanced modulator, I think of a teeter-totter, upper and lower on each side of it.
Okay.
That's how I remember it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hmm.
This is encouraging that we're passing these things, huh? Pretty awesome.
Yay.
Well, we had a question on a couple of these things. So even if we missed all the ones we had questions on, we're still going to get like a 31, 32. It's a solid pass.
Yeah.
I did 2 of these ARRL tests today, and I was surprised there was only in those 2, and then the ones we did here tonight, there's only 1 calculation.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's what I was
I
thinking.
hate
Yeah,
those. I hate those things.
we got lucky.
When I
on-
went in and
got
passed
lucky.
my extra, I took 9 tests that day. So I really am an advocate of taking practice tests. And then
Yeah.
you mark the ones you missed and look them up,
Yep.
particularly if you miss them twice in a row. Look
Yeah.
up the ones you don't miss, and it really reinforces it. That's what's so beautiful about the ARL book, because you go to the question number, go back to the chapter page and read some more information about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it gives you the number.
Very
there was
good.
one more thing I wanted to mention. Let me find it here. So, there are some test dates that have been made available for online testing. I'm going to send this. It'll be March the 8th, which is next Monday. These may have already been taken, but I'll send these links to you, and when you click on it, go down to the bottom, and yeah, it says 0 of 4, so all 4 are available.
It said those were text only tests.
Yeah. the tech-
Yeah, but we're gonna, those have been made available because there wasn't enough techs that signed up for them. There's a few of them that they did get signed up and taken, but I talked to Scott and he said he reserved a whole bunch of them privately, so only our classes, our technician and generals could sign up for them. So I will send this this email to you,
Great.
and these are reserved just for our 2 classes. And if we don't get used, if they don't get signed up for by Friday
Mhm.
evening or probably Saturday, he's going to release them to the general public. And if you're not ready for testing, don't worry, we'll have other tests later in the future. Just send Daniel or me an email, and when you think that you're ready, we don't. Daniel has a really good thing. We don't want to pressure anybody. It's like Ernest and Julio Gallo. We serve no wine before it's time. Wait until you're.
I just want to get it over with.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we're not, we don't want to discourage you. We want you
Yeah.
to pass. When you start passing these things by 80%, you're missing, doing, you miss 9. If you start missing 5 or 6 on every test you take, you're ready to take the test.
Yeah.
I'm missing about 10 in average. I'm 1 below it.
Well, see how you do after this class here, because we filled a lot of gaps in here. This is 60 some questions. How many questions? 69. So we're looking at 15% of the questions were right here. So that's a question and a half. If you got what you got tonight, you're going to be up to 8.
Yeah.
Missing 8.
Yeah, and if you have any questions that come up later on, don't hesitate to ping Daniel or myself, and we'll work on them. That's what we're here for.
All
Hey,
right.
Jim, can we can sign up for anything we find on ham.study though? I mean, like, they seem to come from all angles, like a lot of anchorage.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah,
so anything available is fine there, right?
oh yeah, totally. I
Okay.
just had Scott, who's with our Mike and Key. I asked him, can you please reserve some slots just for our technician and our general class? And he
Okay.
said sure, because you got to get Daniel. You were in that loop. It was like 4 VEs or more that would sit in on them. So
Yeah,
you
3
had to.
VEs sit on them. They do four tests in 2 hours. That's 4 half-hour sessions. And if he's got another room open, then they can only do 8. So he's got a limited number of people that he can test in a session.
Yep.
So that's why he opened a couple sessions up just for the class and let us sign up first.
And I'm pretty sure that, well, there's a document that describes how exactly the test processing works, and I'll send that with the links too,
Great.
because you have to
Yeah,
have
2 cameras.
have a cell phone and your laptop, and then you go around and you show that you don't have your book sitting right next to you.
Right.
and you don't have your cheat sheet sitting over here in the corner. So yeah, they
Don't
do
push
all
the
that.
system, because guys, it's
Yeah.
it's been really difficult to get testing this through the Zoom
Yeah.
situation.
Right.
And we don't want to foul that up, because it's been about a year and we just haven't had tests.
Yeah.
So It's been a very difficult year.
And Jim or Daniel, one of you said last time, I mean, so if you take the test, if you don't pass it, do you get another shot at it that night or not?
Not with Scott's test. With the in-person test, I can do that,
Okay,
but not with Scott's.
Yeah.
So, but you're gonna pass it. You start hitting 80%, you start missing 5, 6 questions, you'll pass.
Good.
5 minutes.
Mm.
All good?
Yeah, very, very helpful, guys. Thank you so much for this
Cool.
review session.
Yeah, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank
All
you,
those-
Jim
all those
and
practice-
Daniel
Thank
and
you.
everybody.
Yep.
Very
Really
much.
appreciate it.
This has been great.
This is great.
All righty. Look forward to seeing all those new generals out, AGs.
Ooh,
You guys are gonna enjoy the HF bands because it doubles the hobby for you.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
all the extra frequencies you got and all the different modes of what's going on in the HF bands. It's really, that was the old amateur radio bands. But it's really gonna double the hobby for you.
Yep.
Nice. Looking
And
forward
be
to that.
sure to break in and go breaker, breaker.
yeah, breaker. We learned that. We learned that in Jim's class. Breaker 19.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Night all.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
All right. Yeah.
Thanks
thank you.
again.
Yeah.
All righty. Thanks,
Take care.
everybody.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Stop this recording.